And this day there are several thousand professors, both in Korea and in Japan, who are members of the Professors World Peace Academy. From 1973 till now, the Professors World Peace Academy has spread so that it now exists in practically every country of the non-communist world. And I want to explain to you the context of this greeting. There have been two international congresses of the Professors World Peace Academy. The first one took place on December 18, 1983 in Seoul, Korea, in which professors from 72 nations came to participate at Reverend Moon's invitation. It was my high privilege to be one of them. It was decided that the second International Congress would take for itself a topic of significance to all of the nations of the world. That topic was the fall of the Soviet Empire, not in the sense that the people who came were actively seeking to go to war against the Soviet Union or anything like that, but through Reverend Moon's guidance and inspiration, over 300 scholars from every nation of the non-communist world, that is the non-Soviet communist world, including, amazingly enough, a scholar from the People's Republic of China, came together and they presented papers that they had worked on for many, many months, in which they asked the question, given the fact that there are certain inherent instabilities in the Soviet system, given the fact that the Soviet system has been much longer on promises than on fulfillment, what is the future of the Soviet system and how will that affect the rest of the world? No conference of this kind has ever before been held. To get 300 scholars from New Zealand, from Australia, from the People's Republic of Hungary, from Poland even, from France, from Germany, from Switzerland, to come together and to give their expert opinions, and out of this many, many books will be written, is an achievement which had not taken place before. I must also tell you about one or two other conferences that I've attended recently, which were under the direct inspiration of Reverend Moon. In July, a World Congress of CARP, the Collegiate Association for the Research of Principles, an organization of young men and women dedicated to trying to find a religious way of dealing with the problems affecting the world, had a Congress in, of all places, the brand new Sumo Coliseum. You all know what sumo wrestling is. Sumo Coliseum in Tokyo, Japan. Reverend Moon's son, I believe it was his number one son, is that correct? Reverend Moon's number one son gave the principal talk. It was also my privilege to do so. And there were 10,000 university students at this gathering, an extraordinary gathering. So that all over the world things are happening. They're not just happening right here. It's wonderful that they're happening here, but they're happening all over the world. Christian professors gathering together, called together by Reverend Moon in Osaka, Japan. Groups from Thailand, Manila, the Philippines, New Zealand, Australia, discussing the future of communism in Seoul, Korea. And out of gatherings such as this, the 200 professors, and I want to stress that these are world-class professors, the most successful in their field, addressed this greeting to Reverend Moon, and I must also tell you that they were extremely mindful of what had happened to Reverend Moon, and this was very much on their mind when they wrote this. I read, dated August 18th, 1985, almost 2 years ago, on December 18th, 1983, you, Reverend Moon, hosted presidents and leaders of the Professors World Peace Academy from 72 nations at the First International Congress of PWPA in your homeland in Korea. At that time, a resolution was made which marked a historic new beginning for PWPA International. Today, August 18, 1985, we are witnessing the conclusion of the Second International Congress of PWPA in Geneva, Switzerland. Despite your incarceration between the First and Second International Congress, your unstinted support has aided the rapid expansion of PWPA projects throughout the world. You have helped the Academy to sponsor the activities of over 70 national chapters, and you have supported the publication of a new journal, the Quarterly International Journal on World Peace. Now we have witnessed one of the most comprehensive conferences on the Soviet system ever to take place anywhere. This could not have happened without your support. The expansion of activities culminating in the Second International Congress has established the Professors World Peace Academy as a substantial organization in the work for world peace. And I want to add to that statement, we're talking about an organization that literally has as its membership thousands and thousands of senior professors from the best universities in the world. I continue. At the first Congress, it was acknowledged that while communism has been exposed as tyranny, democracies have also failed to rally the world towards alternatives that inspire hope and courage. At this second Congress, we have learned in detail how communism became tyranny, and we have heard proposals for alternatives for a new and more peaceful and prosperous Russia. Further inspired by the success of this International Congress, it is our determination to make PWPA a major force for bringing a message of hope and courage to a world that has experienced tyranny, want, and despair. We want to rekindle the ideals of humanity and to seek a world of peace founded upon love and heart. It is our conviction that the PWPA can actively promote a new cultural revolution that respects the dignity of all human beings. 13 months ago, you entered prison and became the symbol of protest against religious intolerance and racial bigotry. Your example has inspired others to work for a world free of such indignity. Your suffering has not gone unnoticed. Today, we wish to send you a greeting from Geneva, Switzerland, and express our joy in your release. We want to reaffirm our desire for many more fruitful years of cooperation with you in the work for a new and peaceful world. And on behalf of all of the professors, Reverend Moon, I thank you for all that you have done for them.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time I would like to begin the introductions of our speakers for the evening, and I will help them by announcing to you that they are limited in their time. Now, they have been allowed 10 minutes each. Now, the problem is simple. The names virtually read like a who's who in conservative circles, in liberal circles, no, in religious circles. And tonight, you've got men such as Dr. Robert Grant, Dr. Joseph Lowry, Dr. Cleon Skousen, Dr. Milton Reed, and then one that's not a preacher, but we may ordain him before this is all over with, and that's Mr. Arnaud de Beaugrave. But as you can see, with that lineup, it's almost impossible for them to even make introductions, let alone get into their speech and get it over with. Gentlemen, you're on notice. I have what's known as the proverbial tail puller, and I will pull the tail of your coats if you don't quit. And I would also like to instruct our PA system operators, you have at 10 minutes on the dot with each one. Turn the mics off if you have to on my signal. Now, see, I can do that up front without offending anyone. And if any of you are offended, then you come and apologize to me when we're finished. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, it's indeed a great pleasure that I have to present to you a man who has not only gained the reputation of being a great leader, a great Christian, a man who loves this country, but I must share with you a man who is probably my very dearest friend in the world. Dr. Robert Grant and I met. I'm not going to tell you how old he is, but Social Security is 50 years old. How would you like to be as old as Social Security? Dr. Grant and I met in California. He comes tonight as the chairman of the board of the Coalition for Religious Freedom. He comes as one of the founders and chairman of Christian Voice Incorporated, which is the oldest and the largest religious political lobby organization in the nation. And he comes to you tonight as a man that Walter Cronkite said was very, very instrumental. Dr. Lowry, you may throw something at him at this, but Dr. Cronkite said, or Mr. Cronkite said, that he was one of them that was instrumental in getting Ronald Reagan elected to the presidency. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome with me Dr. Robert Grant of Christian Voice.
He's going to pay for that. I'm just delighted to be here this evening. This is an impressive occasion and a beautiful sight to view from this vantage point. The question of religious freedom was a contentious question even 200 years ago. Washington and Patrick Henry, he famous for his statement, "Give me liberty or give me death," were in favor of establishing Christianity as the official state religion and supporting it with tax dollars. At the same time, Thomas Jefferson and Madison were strongly opposed to that idea because they feared the religious tyranny that could result from that. They had the history of the bad experience of England, where they had a state church, and the abuses that flowed from that experience. 12 years after the signing of the Declaration of Independence, Virginia was struggling with the incorporation of a statement on religious freedom into its constitution. Patrick Henry opposed the incorporation of that statement into the state constitution of Virginia. Jefferson, who was in Paris, wrote to Madison, and he said, "Let us pray for his early demise." We sometimes think that the Founding Fathers were in accord with each other, but this was not the case in religious liberty. A tension that began 200 years ago is with us today, and that tension is still here. The tension between the establishment, the recognition of a religious ideals versus the establishment of religion, etc. That tension is still here. And in those 200 intervening years, we have seen some remarkable changes in this land of America. America has become a land where children can no longer pray audibly in school. That was something that was not envisioned 200 years ago. It is now an America where senior citizens are forbidden to pray over government-provided meals in California. It is an America today where the idea of chaplains in the military is being debated. It is an America today, now 200 years later, where churches are padlocked, where ministers are sent to jail. It is an America 200 years later where the official recognition of the birth of Jesus is now forbidden in many of our cities. It is an America where the freedom to practice our religion, the religion of our choice, is to be considered a privilege granted by a yet-to-be-established bureaucracy in their day rather than an inherent God-given right. It is an America today, some 200 years later, in which an unpopular Oriental religious leader would be jailed by a hostile bureaucracy for expressing and exercising his religious convictions in accordance with the instructions of his followers and his church. This is an America that is quite different than the one of 200 years ago. This is an America that would have amazed Washington, Jefferson, Henry, and Madison alike. Jefferson would have looked at America today and would have been amazed. Washington Henry would have said, "We told you so." This is what would happen. Jefferson and Madison would have said, "Our amendment was geared to prevent this from happening." But I'm for both of them. I'm for Jefferson and I'm for Washington, because the two of them together have provided us with this historic tension that has resulted in the climate of freedom that has not gone to the excess of establishment, but has made it possible for all of us, whatever our religious persuasions may be, to exercise those freely until recent days. Some have said that Jefferson's intention was to establish a secular state. Nothing could have been further from the case. All you need do is read the preamble to the Virginia Statement on Religious Freedom. It is full of religious talk. It speaks of the Creator. It is not an irreligious or a secular document. That was not his intention. Washington and Jefferson would both agree today that the tension that was produced has now been lost, and as a result we are facing a crisis in religious freedom. How then would these men who differed on that issue view the case of the Reverend Sun Myung Moon if they lived today? They would, I suspect, applaud the some 40 major religious organizations who joined as amici friends of the court in support of Reverend Moon. They would have scorned the bureaucrats who bent all the rules to get this man. They would lament the establishment of precedents that have overturned the basic right of an accused to choose either a jury or a bench trial. They would denounce the presumptions of civil judges and courts to dictate to churches how they would handle their money and govern their internal affairs. They would bemoan the failure of a Supreme Court to stand as the final arbiter of justice and defend the one who is being unfairly treated. And they would join together, I suspect, to pray devotedly for the soon demise of those politicians, those judges, those bureaucrats who abuse the power of their office by striking at the very heart of our God-given religious fight. Could we join with them in devotedly praying for either the conversion or the demise of the overseers of Reverend Milton Reed's church? Could we join together in praying for the conversion or the soon demise of judges who persecute churches? Could we join devotedly to pray for the conversion or the demise of bureaucrats who forbid seniors the right to pray before their meals? Could we join devotedly in prayer for the conversion or demise of those unprincipled attorneys who use the law as a club against unpopular leaders? Yes, I think we can, and I think we should. I'm encouraged tonight. God is still on the throne. He is sovereign. This is a battle that we can win, my friends, and with God's grace, we're going to do so. God bless you.
I've looked long and hard, and I see that Dr. Grant is the only one that has a prettier suit than I do tonight. His is all velvet. Meaningful and powerful remarks. It's difficult to introduce a man like Dr. Joseph Lowry. He's the president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. He's been called an activist. He's been called a rabble-rouser. He's been called a great American. He's been called a troublemaker. He's been called many things. But tonight, he stands on this platform and sits at this table as the highest representative that a man can attain in this land, and that is an ambassador of Almighty God. He stands tonight as the pastor, ladies and gentlemen, of the Central United Methodist Church of Atlanta, Georgia. At this time, would you please welcome with me Dr. Joseph Lowry, please.
Thank you very much. Let me just use my 25 minutes to I'm delighted to have an opportunity to say just a word on the occasion of Reverend Moon's release. In this context, some months ago at the beginning of this struggle, I said that God moves in a mysterious way, and out of the imprisonment of Brother Moon has come a new realization of the need for the community of faith to come together to protect those liberties that are dear to all of us. And we've come to realize that unless we protect each other, there is no security for any of us. I just want to use my time to tell a story. You know that I mentioned it today at a press conference, and somebody came to me and said, I don't know what you mean by Esther going in to see the king. And I just want to tell you that and then sit down. Is that there was a king named Ahasuerus or something like that. In a land that's in the Middle East, that's a source of a great deal of tension today. But he threw a party. And we think we know how to throw parties in our day. We have parties that last for hours, but this party lasted for days and days. They ran out of food, they ran out of drink and entertainment. And Ahasuerus sent for a woman to whom we don't give enough credit. He sent for Vashti, his wife. Not clear what he wanted to do. Whatever it was beneath her moral standards, and she refused to do it. Now, nobody's upset about a wife refusing her husband in these times, but in those times, that was a serious proposition. It wasn't serious, it was serious. See, serious is like a headache. Serious is like a heart attack. It was serious. But Vashti refused to go, and it was a capital offense to disobey your husband if he were the king. But she would not go. And being a husband, the king decided to let it pass. But the other husband there said, you can't do that. If you let her get away with that, all heaven will break loose, and we'll have ERA and women liberation, everything. We got to stop this right here. And so he said, honey, would you please leave the kingdom? He put her out, and he gave her silver and servants, and then began the long search for a new queen. And there was a gentleman in the community, a Jew named Mordecai, who brought up his cousin's daughter in his own household, and he wanted Esther to be in the way. And so the committee that they sent out, he put Esther in the way, and they saw Esther, and I'm going to abbreviate this because I got to get within my time. I only got 20 minutes left. He said, and when the committee saw Esther, they agreed, and they brought Esther before the king, and he agreed, and she became the new queen. And as soon as she became queen, some dude in the kingdom started persecuting the Jews. And Esther decided she wouldn't have anything to do with it. She was the queen now, that she did not have to assume any responsibility for the rights of her people. She was in a privileged position. But Mordecai decided otherwise. And in the evening when the sun went down, and Esther would lie down between her silken comforts and seek rest after drinking vintage wine and bathing in unpasteurized milk, Mordecai took off his shoes and put on sackcloth and ashes and performed what was the first protest march in history. He picketed the palace. And when Esther would sleep, tramp, tramp, tramp of Mordecai's feet would pierce the stillness of the night, and Esther's conscience was touched. And soon she heard the message from Mordecai, Esther, you come to the kingdom for such a time as this. And Esther decided to go in to see the king, and you know what happened. I don't need to tell you that, but I just want to say to the community of faith, it's time for us to go in and see the king. Esther didn't go in on behalf of herself. She wasn't just concerned about her rights and her liberties, but she was concerned about the rights and liberties of all the people. For if some young moon's liberty is not secure, neither is Bob Grant's liberty, nor Bob Seale, nor Joseph Lowry, nor anybody. And that's why we've come here today to say that we shall come together in spite of our many diversities, and God knows we have some real diversities. I don't agree with nothing he said about prayer in school. I don't know what school you going to, Bob. School's where I go, children pray. I hear them blessing the food before they eat. I see them praying before they shoot the basket, and they come and have a huddle for the football game. And I hear all of them saying, Lord, help me pass this test. They're free to pray, and I don't want the government telling my children when nor how to pray. And there's something inconsistent about us wanting to keep the government out of our business on one hand and invite them in to tell us how to run our prayer life on the other hand. Something wrong with that. But let me get back to Esther. We come tonight to understand that there are threats to our liberties. And some of those threats come from one end of the spectrum, and some come from the other end of the spectrum. And if we're serious, about fighting for religious liberty and freedom, we must understand, one, that there's no way to fragment or categorize your opposition against persecution and the violation of our liberties. If you are for religious freedom for anybody, you have to be for religious freedom for everybody. One more thing. I appreciate it. I wish I had time to enjoy that. But you've got to understand this, that there is no way to distinguish between religious liberty and civil liberty. And any government or force that will violate your religious rights will violate your civil rights. And we've got to be just as concerned about protecting civil rights and human rights as we are religious rights. And then finally, I want to say that I'm concerned about alien ideologies that come from the left. And I'm concerned about alien ideologies that come from the right. Extremism in that context is just as dangerous on one end as it is on the other. And we must not only be concerned about the forces that invade Afghanistan, but we also must be concerned about the forces that would shoot down little children in the streets of Soweto in South Africa. Let me make it clear. Let me make it clear that if I have to choose between Tutu and Bota, just as I would choose salvation over sin, just as I would choose darkness over light over darkness, just as I would choose heaven over hell, I'll choose Tutu over Bota. Esther said, if I go in to see the king, I may perish. But if I don't go in to see the king, I've already perished.
There's going to be a time, ladies and gentlemen, for handshaking and greetings. Dr. Lowry, before we started, Dr. Grant came to me and he said, now understand something. I will not follow Dr. Joe Lowry. I got to go first. Well, now, Brother Skousen, what does that do for you? Ladies and gentlemen, our next guest and our next speaker, Mr. Cleon Skousen. He is the founder and the director of the National Center for Constitutional Studies in Washington, D.C. If I knew how to introduce him, I would do it. I really don't, other than to say that he's known around the world as the spokesman for the Constitution of the United States of America, and he's known as a friend. Would you welcome with me, please, Dr. Cleon Skousen.
Thank you. Well, Dr. Lowry, Reverend Moon, Mrs. Moon, Dr. Pock, and all you distinguished guests and my wonderful friends out there, just imagine this, nearly 2,000 are gathered. We have a big overflow into another room, and here we all are rejoicing in this great event tonight. Reverend Moon, I bring you the greetings of my wife and my 8 children and my 42 grandchildren. There are 3 days in August that I shall always remember. August the 13th, my wedding day. August the 29th, my wife's birthday. And August the 20th, when we welcomed Reverend Moon back to freedom. When Reverend Moon came to the United States in 1971, couldn't speak a word of English. Sort of a fantastic situation, really. But he had a message for America from the Bible. And it's the same in Korean as it is in English. If my people, who are called by my name, will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven. I will forgive their sins and heal the land. Now, the people of this land are God's people. They are not the only people that belong to God, but in a sense they are a special people because either they or their ancestors fled from places around the world to come to this land where God had created the first free people in modern times. Now, when the early settlers came here, they entered into a covenant that they would serve God, that they would remember His Son and His great sacrifice, and they would try to make themselves worthy to be loved of God. But as time went on, we began to wander, and in some respects, our system and our society had elements of corruption creep in. In our own generation, we've even had elements of Sodom and Gomorrah appear in our midst. We found that innocent people were beginning to be put in prison
We found that some of our churches had chains across their doors with padlocks. We found ministers being arrested from a posture of prayer and put into prison. We found mothers and fathers jailed just because they didn't want their children exposed to the pornography that was in some of the books, the humanistic and false philosophies that were taught by some of the teachers, and they did not want their children to be other than just fine, upstanding American people. They didn't want them in these government schools. They were arrested for that. You see, something had changed. Something was wrong. So Reverend Moon came to America in 1971 under the inspiration of the diamond dust of God's great Spirit that drifts down on the human family if they'll listen to it. And he came here to tell us to humble ourselves and to pray and to seek his face and turn from our wicked ways, because God would hear us and he would forgive our sin and he would heal this great land. Well, how do you do this? You come to America. You've announced that you're going to save America. Isn't that exciting? Now, the thing that has fascinated me is the manner in which he contrived to do that. The plan. How would you have done it? Well, he started out by saying that you've got to have at least one newspaper, major newspaper, that tells the truth. So he invested $150 to $200 million in the Washington Times, which has now become a national newspaper, and my son, who works in the White House, tells me it's the most widely read paper in the Royal Palace. Secondly, Reverend Moon said, we ought to get all of those who are the leaders of the congregations of the churches of God assembled together, united in a program that will make them feel comfortable with each other and fight evil unitedly. Now, that's a great achievement in and of itself if you can do it. He didn't ask us to change our theology. He just said, let's eat together and let's talk together and let's pray together and learn together, and after that we'll work together against evil. Now, when I was in the FBI, I saw a lot of these evil elements that were creeping into our schools and into our government and so forth. And I agonized over it because I could see some very serious deterioration going on. And I just wish somebody would speak up against some of these forces. And so when I saw the film, The Sword is My Truth, and I saw a Korean, a hero of the Korean War, speak up to the chairman of a congressional committee, and that chairman had sponsored almost every Soviet-oriented left-wing affair that had come along in his lifetime, and I heard this Korean colonel speak up against him and do it so intelligently and reminded of what he had been doing, that is, the chairman had been doing. I felt like standing up and cheering. Now, finally, the fourth thing that Reverend Moon wanted us to do was to get back to the Founding Fathers' original success formula. He knew we were off the track. Didn't know exactly what we'd done, but he wanted, whatever made us a free and a great people in the first place, he wanted us to get back to it. That was a job for Americans.
Yes, sir.
Now, in 1971, the very year that he came here, some of us got together and organized what has become known as the National Center for Constitutional Studies. And for 14 years, we have worked almost day and night to put together a carefully documented revival of the Founding Fathers' original concepts. And we put it in the kind of a book that's easy to read and carefully illustrated. And it comes off the press after 14 years of work on September the 1st, about 10 days from now. And it will be called The Making of America. All right, now all of us here tonight know what the founders really wanted us to do. It goes something like this. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States. You see, that's really what it's all about. And Reverend Moon is saying, those are the 6 things we're supposed to be doing, and let's get on about it. And so tonight, as we face this great battle for freedom, founders established it, we've got to revive it and popularize it. And so we say to Reverend Moon, welcome back to the front line trenches in this great battle. Welcome home.
Tonight, this like gathering here for welcoming me. Thank you for you. Honorable Chairman and members of God and Freedom Committee, distinguished clergy from all parts of the country, ladies and gentlemen, I am truly grateful for and humbled by your welcoming me back from prison in such a deep way. Representing all parts of the United States and so many denominations, I would also like to extend my sincere appreciation to those of you who have supported me during my court battles. In the filing of the amicus briefs to Supreme Court, in the meetings and rallies for religious freedom, in prayer meetings in the Common Suffering Fellowship, and in the Council Ministerial Alliance. Also, I thank you for your prayers and for many letters I have received from you while I was at Danbury, which I'll never forget. I have suffered imprisonment 6 times in my lifetime. As in the past, this time in prison provided me a moving experience with God. I was not there because of my personal actions or mistakes, yet I did not bruise with resentment or hatred for those who persecuted me. Nor did I spend my time in prison pleading my innocence. Rather, I dedicate the time to prayer and meditation for understanding what America must do to fulfill God's will for the world. The determination which underlies my whole ministry and life is to relieve the great and long suffering of God. Since the world is ignorant of God's heart of suffering, my work and the work of the unification movement have long been misunderstood and persecuted. However, I understand the urgency of my mission before God, and despite the lack of understanding on the part of my family, not to mention the general public, Christian churches, nations, or even the whole world, this persecution has not really mattered very much to me. Throughout my life, I have communicated deeply with God, and through numerous spiritual experiences, I have come to know His heart and His love. I have always testified to this. To me, God is not a vague God residing in the realm of imagination. God is alive, and I relate to Him directly in my heart. I experience Him in every cell of my body. I know that I am addressing clergy who also have been participants in the fulfillment of God's will. You are welcoming me here today, then as you and I know, it's not a personal welcome for the individual, Reverend Moon, but it's a testament of that will of God, for which I have lived my life, to do the will of God. Is our common and utmost concern. Therefore, I would like to share with you some of my realization about this will of God. Our living personal God is eternal, absolute and unchanging. Therefore, His will also is eternal, absolute, and unchanging. When God created human beings, He must have had a purpose and an ideal. God's purpose and ideal is world united through love, with God as the parents of all people, and the true love of God. All people would be brothers and sisters living in one harmonious world of harmony. God's ideal, then, the creation of one world under God. God, who is the essence of love, creates all creation for the purpose of love. An individual cannot love independently. It takes both a subject and an object to love. What God needs absolutely, therefore, is an object who He can love. God created the universe motivated by love, especially human beings who are created in His own image. As we read in Genesis 1:7-27, are the visible and substantial subject of God's love. To all mankind, God is the eternal, invisible, and internal parents and ancestor. And the perfect Adam and Eve were to be the eternal, visible, and external parents and ancestors to all humankind. The greatest, holiest love takes place when subject and object becomes one through giving and receiving love, eternally centered on God. In this true love, perfect unity becomes about naturally. All life becomes interconnected, and the idea of God is realized. God's original will was that His beloved children, Adam and Eve, would become the living, visible reflection of their invisible Creator, and those who have eternal love, consummating the ideal of love and life. It is commonly thought that the creator and the created being can never be equal. If this is so, then the ideal of love is never possible with God. God's ideal of love was to let his children, Adam and Eve, be his visible substantial object and become one with him. Indeed, as is stated in 1 Corinthians 3:16, God desires to dwell in man. The idea of love of the invisible God is realized when man and woman, Adam and Eve, in essence become perfected. When a person centering on God attains complete unity between mind and body, then he or she attains maturity of character and through objectivity to God. This means that he or she becomes an eternal object of God's love, God's ideal, and God's life. When Adam and Eve attained this ideal as God's true substantial children, they would naturally have propagated to create an ideal family, and eventually from that family would have developed in ideal society, nation, and world. As a result of humankind's complete response to God's absolute love, all would have attained the highest joy in life, the ideal of happiness, and eventually the kingdom of heaven. God created Adam and Eve on the earth so that heaven would be realized first on earth. After life on earth, the spirit of those who lived ideal lives on earth would go to heaven in the spiritual world, where they would live eternally. God created all things in pairs and created for the sake of human beings. This enables all things to dwell in harmony under the principle of love. With God's love flowing through human beings, all the creation took place in realizing God's life and ideal. While the world flowing, all things of creation were nothing other than the textbook of love for them, displaying an endless variety of love manifestations. Adam and Eve, representing God's masculinity and femininity, were to gradually awaken to love through their life in God's textbooks of love, which is in nature. They were to become perfectly mature and realize the ideal of marriage. Such was the ultimate purpose of God in creation. God's love was not only directed to the vertical relationship to love between himself and human beings, but also after the perfection of vertical love to the horizontal relationship of love between Adam and Eve. God, who was exist as invisible subject ever since the beginning, was yearning for someone who would respond to his love and was waiting to meet his perfected visible object, man and woman. How stimulating, how fulfilling that love would have been. That moment was the very moment when God, the eternal parent, was to have resided within Adam and Eve. These external parents to be completely one with them. In that moment, the idea of love would have been accomplished. The invisible parents, God would have resided in the visible parents, Adam and Eve, and would have become the eternal parents in the visible world. By this, Adam and Eve were to have common the true parents, the true original ancestors of humankind. So precious was this true love, that to violate such love was the ultimate crime, a crime of universal magnitude. In morality, the correction of youth for breakup of families, incest, homosexuality, and other unspeakable crimes are the world reality today, about which God is agonizing. The idea of creation is to achieve the perfect family, founded upon noble and eternal love. But how did today's tragic reality come about? As the last today drew near, the crime of the human fall is manifested clearly in society. We are reaping who has been sown. I do not have time to discuss the detail of human fall, but I will say that I struggled for years to discover the truth of the fall, and I testified that its cause was immorality involving the first human family and an archangel. In the unification principle, Satan is the conceptual being or a hypothetical entity. This is a real being, the very being who destroyed the ideal of love and safety the human lineage from God's dominion to his own dominion. Jesus himself said very clearly in John chapter 8 that the devil is the ancestor of humankind. The devil, Satan, is a very adulterer that raves the idea of love, which God meant to realize through Adam and Eve. The love which would have raised Adam and Eve to the position of God's own external self. This may be new to many of you, but this is the truth. It was discovered through hard-fought struggles I endured in spiritual world, as I sought for the answers to the most fundamental problems of life. If you pray seriously and deeply, you will find a formation of these answers. Then why has it taken so long for God to punish Satan for this crime? Satan stole the idea of love from God and possesses humankind as a false parent. Through false love, usurping God's position, therefore God has to begin by reclaiming human beings from Satan's dominion of shifting their lineage. Because of the fall, the relationship between God and man was severed, and the righteous relationship between people, through originally give and take centered on true love, was also lost. Harmonious unity among people based on true love was destroyed, along with the joy of life, and individuals become enemies. The world became hell, full of distrust. God's plan of creation was to create man and woman as true love trees, and made the earth a plentiful garden The fall brought instead the dominion of Satan over the human ancestral lineage, creating the wilderness of wild olive trees. God wants to cut the wild olive trees and engraft them with the true olive tree, which is Christ. But God cannot cut and engraft those wild olive trees, which are possessed by Satan without some foundation being made. The very reason God established religion was to create his own garden, in which he could cut the wild olive trees and engraft them with the true olive tree. On the foundation of religion, God will send the Messiah that graft humankind to him through the Messiah, the true tree. This is the essence of Messianic ideal. From this point of view alone can we correctly understand the biblical doctrine of rebirth. God pulls people away from the false dominion of Satan, giving them rebirth through the love, which is much stronger than Satan's love. Since all people are born from parents and ancestors of false love, in the lineage of false love, all people must be born a second time. This is from parents and ancestors of true love. In the lineage of true love, becoming true children and people of God, the blood of Jesus and Holy Communion both indicate the process of the shift of human beings from Satan's lineage to God's lineage. All people must be born again. This is the destiny of all fallen human beings. No matter how difficult this may be, we must all treat this path. Salvation cannot be had but by rebirth, being grafted into God's lineage, out of Satanic lineage. Since we are born into Satan's lineage, the process of rebirth requires complete denial of the self, including willingness to deny one's possessions, one's own tradition or culture, even one's concepts about the world. What we already own in the satanic realm can never be recognized by God. We must renounce them to be born again, to engraft ourselves to the true tree. We must sever everything. Jesus, who came as the olive tree, is the true parent himself. Since he came as true parents to give us rebirth, he told us to sever all our old relationships and attachments before coming to God. In Matthew 10:36, Jesus warned that the person's enemies will be the members of his or her own family, and that one must cut off his or her own parents and family if they stand before the person and following Jesus. We can understand this in light of the fact that the family represents the false lineage. My dear clothes, our task is to learn about God's will and to carry it out. We must become men and women who are bound in God's hand. We must become those who are willing to respond to the call of God. We must never ask God only for our individual salvation or personal heaven. Is it not our privilege as the Christians to respond to the call of the Messiah and to live and die for him and his cause. Our religion, our denominations must exist for the will of Almighty God, not just for the propagation of narrow views. God cannot reside within narrow views. God is not sectarian. God sees far beyond denominationalism. He is not confined within exclusive dogmas. He is rather the parent to us all. And his unbounding love distinguishes no race or color of skin. He does not recognize the words of nationalism or cultural tradition. He is trying to his very hardest today to embrace all of humanity. Thank you. My dear clergy, do you think it is more chance that in America, the heaven of religious freedom, a nationwide movement for religious freedom flourished up as a result of Reverend Moon's imprisonment? In truth, this is not an accident, but God's dispensation working behind the scenes. And would you consider it a coincidence that America, as a nation which carries the banner for the free world, and which has come to scoff at the real threat of communism, is now becoming aware of seriousness of present danger through the Council ministerial alliances. The CMA is a truly interdenominational movement without words, which has spread like wildfire across this nation. Can we call this a mere accident? America is the nation founded on the spirit and love of God. Especially after World War II, God raised up America as a leader of nations for the salvation and freedom-loving unity of the world. Internally, He was preparing this nation for the second coming of the Messiah, and to be contrary, that chaos for the world. Unfortunately, this country continued to ignore the monumental will of God. America is withdrawing more and more from its global responsibilities, preferring to enjoy false comfort as if this nation were the world into itself. This attitude, of course, merely multiplies Americans' problem, both within the outside its borders. Serious racial problems, deterioration of social, ethical, and moral values, declining of religious life and Christian faith, and the rise of materialism and communism will not disappear just by ignoring them. God called me to come to America because of these problems. Christianity must repent with great anguish and must unite. We close must re-examine ourselves and also repent. We are reliving the time when Jesus came to us and called the world to repentance. That call is being repeated now. We must fulfill the world mission which God has bestowed upon us. Without question, America must change. A new religious reformation must take place. Christianity must transcend denominationalism and ascend to a higher dimension. We must realize that consider seriously the mission of Christianity to lead the supra-denominational cultural revolution and on a worldwide scale. To commemorate that reunion tonight, we must determine to pursue the original path of Christianity. We must march forward on that way, that we might receive our coming Messiah and help fulfill the will of God. May God's abundant blessing be with you, with your family, and with all churches of America. Thank you.
Millions of cable television subscribers receive C-SPAN programs over equipment supplied by Times Fiber Communications. High-performance coaxial cables, fiber optic systems, and Star Switch networks are produced for the broadcast local area networks and defense industries as well. Times is pleased to provide its support for C-SPAN operations.